And now on to our news feature. For 2 years, a team of researchers interviewed Mau Mau veterans as well as historians' mission to document the history of Kenya's independence struggle from the perspective of the Mau Mau. The outcome is a series of articles, books, and documentaries launched under the banner MAU MAU Chronicles. Richard Munga attended the launch and brings us the details on tonight's episode of History in Perspective.
Access that past often leads to paths laden with contradiction.
It was a unique event held at the village market, Nairobi. Mau Mau veterans were here to witness both on their behalf and that of their long-departed colleagues as the history they helped craft during the struggle for Kenya's independence was being documented afresh and based on their input.
Mambiego karaje na kulega urutani wa muzungu. Ikarate murugo na mugani no kete guthukia kirira gitu na gaturehere kirira gya katurumirire. Rero idi yale ya kulega na muzungu biyo. Tekana na mundu akoigata ni ucio muzungu ucio. Agina kirira gya ndaku.
The Mau Mau movement, spearheaded by among others Stanley Mathenge and Dedan Kimathi, led Kenya's armed struggle for independence from the British colonial rule from the early 50s until 1963, when Kenya gained independence and was granted self-rule.
Harambe! 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 Na mashamba yetu harambe! Na mifugo yetu harambe! Na serikali yetu tukufu harambe!
However, in what many historians have termed as a national shame, the Mau Mau movement for a period of 40 years since independence, that is 1963 to 2003, was a banned organization.
Truth is always the first casualty of war. And, in the case of Mau Mau, truth was really the first casualty. Because the truth of the matter is that these people were entitled to fight for their rights, to fight for their property, to fight for their land, and all the other grievances that they had. They were genuine grievances.
According to some historians, the attempt to downplay the Mau Mau movement's legacy has over the years come off as too deliberate.
The books that were being read in 1960, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, and 63, even 66, about Kenya and the history of East Africa, they were all beating up, saying how useless and negative the Mau Mau was, did not achieve anything, it delayed everything. Now that's what children were being taught in primary schools, upper primary, in secondary schools, and when they went to the university, they were taught, the things were repeated. So the conditioning, the anti-Mau Mau conditioning through schools was a deliberate effort by the colonial government in order to ensure that once independence comes, Mau Mau will be beaten more. And there were those people who said that we shall beat you now, and when independence comes, we shall still beat you more.
It is on this premise that the MAU MAU Chronicles sought to correct in a bid to ensure the youth and Kenyans in general get a chance to pay homage to the deserving heroes and heroines who risked their lives fighting bravely to liberate the country.
Asking these people who were virtually neglected in terms of giving them a chance to tell their story was a very thrilling experience. We did encounter a few challenges here and there because they are generally people who feel forgotten. So one of the first things was to convince them that it was important to them to tell their story. As we were explaining to them in the Gikuyu language, because it's not given.
The discourse on Mau Mau has not always been objective. Right from the beginning, propaganda was used as a tool in the war against Mau Mau. It was part of the counterinsurgency response by the colonial authorities to the Mau Mau war. So they wanted to disparage the movement as a movement by people who did not know what they were doing because they were primitive and because they were intuitive and emotional, not right-thinking people.
While it is commonplace in history to celebrate the leaders as well as Mau Mau fighters, some historians believe there is more to the story. From the elite Kenyans who went to study abroad in the hopes of returning home to inspire the countrymen and women's fight to freedom, to World War II Kenyan veterans who also returned home to disrupt the colonialist superiority narrative.
Mga tahwa ni utaho mga tahwa ni adugo. Madie ni mungereza no wari hinya muno. Tol mungereza no wahura naga na Hitler. Na mungereza no wahura naga na Mussolini. Noigwa. Nio mahura naga na mundu ucio so mungereza no wathaga burudi uriku. Ni akimagitagira. Na ni anyitaga andu aria mari anake ni ndingianyitwo ndarika hi. Uri ni ndingiathire kuthwo ndarika na kanini. No aria makinyitirwo ni macokire magicoka guku kuma 1939 niguo mbari yo yathirire.
Mokire makiuga makundura mambia kwa munene ni atiri. Matana thi bara ina matechire ya muthuko no akue. Mutemenya ati muthuko no oragu. Akamenya muthuko no ahuro na ingatu. No mbe mane bara ine. Ndire monire ona muthuko ndeko ya karangi. Atuye kuonwa ari mwero. Ahananira mundu mweru. Akehiga. Akamenya onake no kiguoya. Na mundu mweru no ore na umreru.
Members of the MAU MAU Chronicles have for the last 2 years traversed the country searching for and interviewing Mau Mau veterans as well as survivors in a bid to tell their stories for future generations.
We ended up interviewing upwards of 60 people who are either veterans of the war or survivors of the war, in addition to a few experts on the Mau Mau.
Mau Mau itself is important, not just to Kenya. Of course, there is the argument that it is responsible for Kenya attaining independence. But more than in Kenya, it's responsible for independence in other African countries. And some various anti-colonial agitations outside the African continent. So it had bigger anti-colonial, anti-imperial ramifications than sometimes is considered.
The effort paid off with the final product comprising a rich blend of online articles, documentaries as well as publications.
Many of the people that had participated in the war and those who had also witnessed the war were coming to the, shall I say, the tail end of their lives. And this was happening without a good number of them having told their side of the story.
Proponents of Mau Mau Chronicles are hopeful that besides documenting independent stories from the brave men and women who participated in Kenya's liberation, the stories will have a place in not only Kenya's history, but also in the school curriculum for generations to come.
Well, that was a chronicle of the Mau Mau. And now we move on to Madenge, a